Welcome back to Reviews and Rankings with Robby Sobel. And today, our hike through Camp Crystal Lake continues with a stop at cabin number 6. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives. Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, was directed by Tom McLaughlin and stars Tom Matthews, Jennifer Cook, David Kagan, and CJ Graham. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, and we are already about halfway through our hike through Camp Crystal Lake. So far this has been an absolute blast, going back and watching some of the horror films that I grew up checking out as a little kid. If you're new to the channel or new to the franchise, I hope I've been able to add a little bit of something different in regards to reviewing these films, but remember, I'm not the only one doing it. I'm not the only one on this hike. A bunch of my friends on YouTube are along with me. You can follow their links in the description below. Check out their channels, check out their reviews. Each one offers a different take, not just on their opinions of the films, but also the aesthetic and the vibe that you get from each video. So even though you'll be looking at a review for the same films, it's going to be a different experience every single time, so I highly recommend that you check each and every one of them out. Alright, so after Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, failed to reignite the franchise, there were some questions that were lingering with Paramount Pictures in regards to what to do with the Friday the 13th franchise and series. Now, Friday the 13th Part 5, it did bring in some money. Its budget was just about $2.2 million, and it brought in $22 million at the box office. Now, typically, if you bring back more than double your budget, that's considered a success. So, 10 times the amount that they spent to make the film they brought back, that's a solid chunk of change coming back to Paramount Pictures and the studio. But the franchise was definitely on a downturn in regards to its profit. Now, fans and critics were not happy with Friday the 13th Part 5 and the direction that they went in regards to the fake Jason. So that film essentially is almost like scrapped. I briefly discussed it in the last video when we were talking about Part 5, but I'll say it again. If you watch all of these films and you just kind of remove Part 5, you can go from 4 to Part 6 and it'll work together perfectly. It's almost like 5 kind of existed in its own little world. It's almost like a one-shot Elseworld story, kind of that we would get later on in the franchise. But in regards to Part 6, this is tonally a lot different, but somehow it works. This is a fun movie. And there's a lot of references in here that make the film feel almost like it's meta, in a sense. Similar to what we would get 10 years later in Scream. So, a lot of times with horror films, what they do, if they get later on in the franchise, they kind of turn into a more comedic direction. Now, the thing with Friday the 13th Part 6, they dabbled a little bit in the comedy, but the story and all the characters are played completely straight. In other franchises like Freddy's Dead in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, Bride and Seed of Chucky in Child's Play, a lot of these films get too far into the comedy, they become parodies. And while they have their fan base, and that's fair, those films are such a turnoff for me, and those are ones that I skip all the time when I binge those particular franchises. But in regards to the Friday the 13th franchise, Part 6 is not only one that I do not skip, it's one that I jump right to when I want to watch, and it's often at the top or near the top of my ranking. With Friday the 13th Part 5 essentially scrapped, Jason is dead and buried, but Tommy Jarvis is back because he is not convinced that Jason is truly dead. He drives to the cemetery where Jason is buried, attempting to finally kill him once and for all, even though he's already dead and buried in the ground. But you gotta throw logic out the window with these films at times. He brings along his friend, who was played by the guy who played Horshack in Welcome Back, Kotter. I'll put up his image here. Tommy this time is not played by Corey Feldman. He is played by Tom Matthews. He's the only actor to reprise this role technically with a little asterisk later on down the line in the fan film Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow. Those are very good, by the way. Check those out. Support fan films, especially good high quality ones. So Tommy and his buddy go to the grave. They open it up and you see Jason there completely dead and buried. Tommy goes, stabs him, and then a lightning bolt strikes Jason and the spear in his chest, and it awakens him. Of course, Tommy's friend is not long for this film, and he's quickly killed right by a punch right through the heart, and Tommy is fleeing. Now, of course, Tommy heads to the local sheriff's office to inform them about what's going on. They think he's absolutely insane, and they try to just lock him up. On the flip side, Camp Crystal Lake is no more. Well, not exactly. Camp Crystal Lake, the camp itself, is there, but it's now going by the name of Camp Forest Green. Obviously in an attempt to kind of distance the camp from the killings that had happened years prior. Camp Forest Green is already in effect. We have our counselors there, led by Meg, who is the daughter of the sheriff, who has already had his run-in with Tommy Jarvis. And the kids are there. This is the first time in the franchise that we actually have children at the camp. Now, here's the thing also about Friday the 13th Part 6 that stands out from the previous entries. In the previous films in the franchise, Jason was technically still a human. He hadn't really died. They thought he died, but he was never really buried in the ground and had a chance to rot. So he was running around, and despite the narrative that Jason never ran, that's not really true. You watch Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3. And of course, 4. And Jason Voorhees was running all over Camp Crystal Lake and the surrounding area, trying to go after all the counselors and the people that are there to kill them. He had a personality. Remember, he lifts up his mask to smile at Chris in Friday the 13th Part 3. And he's just a menace. But now Jason has been dead and buried in the ground. He's rotting away like an undead zombie corpse. So when he comes back, he is not running around. He is power walking, but that's about the most that we get out of Jason. Of course, he gets his hockey mask back after Tommy dropped it when he was digging him up earlier in the film, and Jason is making a beeline to Camp Crystal Lake and killing everybody he can in the process who happens to get in his way. Now, that leads us to a really funny scene that is comedic, but it's also pretty gory, or as gory as it could be due to the MPAA really kind of clamping down hard on horror movies here in the late 80s, and would only get worse in the future installments. Jason runs into a group of paintballers who are just having some fun, and unfortunately for them, they run into Jason. Jason kills 3 of them with one slice of his machete, taking out 3 all at the same time. This kind of one nerdy, geeky guy doesn't really know what to do as he just fires his paintballs at Jason, but he ends up getting killed as well. One of the best parts of this whole little scene here is Jason grabbing hold of one of the paintballers and throwing him straight into a tree. And when the guy falls back out of the tree, you see the indent of a bloody smiley face. That's kind of just a funny little gag. Just one of the many things in this film that you can kind of get a little wink at. One of the other cool things that we see in regards to kind of being meta and just a little comedic, the groundskeeper here, when they finds out at the graveyard that Jason is gone, he's kind of digging up and he breaks the 4th wall and he kind of talks to the audience, and that's just a really cool, funny moment.
Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
Something else that really stands out in this movie is the relationship between Tommy and Meg. Now, you have to kind of suspend your disbelief here, because if you look at it from her point of view, you have this one guy who's claiming that Jason Voorhees is back from the dead, and your father, the sheriff, has locked him up. Now, you should just kind of write this off as this dude being crazy, and you don't want anything to do with him. But somehow she falls for him. It's that Jarvis charm, I suppose, and she helps him escape from the jail and kind of come back to Camp Crystal Lake to prevent Jason from killing anybody else. Now, on the surface, yes, it sounds ridiculous, but they have good chemistry together. There's a scene where they're driving away in her car, and in an attempt to kind of not be seen by the cops, she shoves his face in her lap, and we kind of get a POV of him, of her crotch, and it's kind of this like little silly but cute moment, and they just vibe together so well. Considering the fact this is the first time and last time we've ever seen them on screen, and they don't even have too much screen time together, it's just amazing. Sometimes people click. That's just the way it is. And that happens in real life, but it also happens in movies. Meg and Tommy, it just works. In regards to the rest of the cast, they're pretty fun, but they don't really get enough screen time to be extremely memorable. There's a kid named Court there, who's kind of this silly, goofy guy, but more so in a cool way, not in a dorky way like a Nettie was, or Ted in the first and second film. He's a cool dude, so he kind of stands out for me a little bit. Also, one of the other female characters named Elizabeth Sissy Baker, I think her name is, and she does something really cool where she actually brings up the legend of Jason in Camp Crystal Lake, and while they're all kind of hanging out at the camp, the counselors, she talks about a Camp Blood card game, and she starts to go into the details about how to play this game, but they end up kind of getting cut off and they're not able to finish. And I remember being a kid trying to figure out how I could finish those rules and play with myself and a bunch of friends. It could be fun, and I'm pretty sure if you go online and just Google it up, there are people who have finished off the rules, and you can actually play the Camp Blood card game from Jason Lives with your buddies. Now, the ending of the film is one of the most memorable. Everyone, of course, is back to the camp, and Megan and Tommy make their way back there. Jason has knocked off some of the counselors and a bunch of Megan's friends, but thankfully he has not killed and doesn't kill any of the kids. He does at one time break into one of the cabins, and one of the girls starts closing her eyes and praying for Jason to go away. Jason looks at her for a moment, and it's almost like he still remembers being a kid, and he knows that the little kids weren't the ones who had anything to do with him drowning. So when she opens up her eyes after the prayer, Jason is gone, and it's almost like we get a little tease if Jason is going to do the killing, but he doesn't. And you know what? Especially this film having a more of a lighter tone, I definitely think that was the way to go. Killing a kid in this particular Jason film would not have worked. Now we get to the end of the film, and Tommy has lured Jason into the lake. He is on a boat, and he's just waiting for Jason to come in. He throws out all these obscenities, calls him a chicken shit and a maggot head and all of these things. And Jason, right before he gets to the boat, he ends up going under the water because of his height. But then he breaks free up top, brings Tommy down to the water. Tommy struggles and struggles and struggles. He's able to get a chain around Jason's neck, and as it's tied to a big boulder, Jason is brought down to the ground. Jason gets one more attempt to grab Tommy, but he turns on the motor of the boat, which crushes Jason's face, and he is left there to die. Because he's been underground for so long, Tommy is saved by Megan, who brings him out to the shore, and with all the kids around cheering Tommy on, Megan's CPR is enough to bring Tommy back, and they live essentially happily ever after. It's a fun, nice ending. It's not one that has like a super big jump scare at the end. But like I said, this film has a little bit of a lighter tone, so you want to make sure you follow through with that in the ending of the film, because, you know, in some of the earlier Jason films, maybe if they killed a kid or they had a little more of a crazy ending, it fit. Not so much in this one. I think Tom McLaughlin, the director, did a really nice job with tying these things together and knowing his limitations and knowing the boundaries that he was setting for himself and the franchise, and he did an A+ job with that. Now here comes my two favorite parts of these Friday the 13th reviews, and we're going to kick it off with the coolest kill of Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. There's some good ones in this movie, but I'm going with Sheriff Garris. That's right, he finally unloads a bunch of shots on Jason at Camp Crystal Lake, even gets a really good one that kind of stops Jason in his tracks. But it's, of course, not enough. Jason gets his hands on the sheriff and bends his back backwards. It's an absolute brutal kill. Just the visual of it is well done, but then the thought in your mind of how that would feel. that would just be devastating to the point of almost like bringing up this claustrophobia, knowing that you'll never be able to move again, even if you're living for a few seconds after. It's brutal. It looks really, really good. And CJ Graham as Jason does a bang-up job. He kind of sets the foundation for when Kane Hodder would take over in the next film and then kind of carry it over for a few more Jason portrayals. But CJ Graham, he's one of my all-time favorites. He's the first Jason that does kind of the zombie Jason. A few years back, I was lucky enough to meet CJ Graham, not just myself, but also my mom and my son. My son dressed up as Jason to that convention and got a picture with him with the mask on and off. It was a bunch of fun, and CJ Graham, I have to say, is a really nice celebrity. Sometimes you go to these conventions and you get a little disappointed, but I can confidently say that if anyone goes to a horror convention and sees CJ Graham there, definitely approach him. Meet him, talk to him, get a picture, get an autograph. He's worth it. He really talks to you like he wants to be there, and he's interested in speaking to his fans and not just there to make a few bucks. All right, well, here comes my favorite part of all of these Friday the 13th reviews, and you guessed it, it's Deadliest Diva time. But unfortunately, I have to admit that this is a little bit on a downturn. That's not a bad thing. It's just with Friday the 13th Part 6 being a little bit lighter in tone. We're not going to get the gratuitous nudity and the abundance of sex that are thrown around here. But we do get a little bit of coitus going on, and it is of a girl named Nikki with her boyfriend Court in an RV. She's kind of riding them a little bit, and he finishes too quick. Sucks for him. But you know what? I think she's cute. She's got a little spunk. And while all her other friends are kind of out doing whatever, she's trying to get it in. You got to respect that. Especially, if you're in your early 20s, late teens, whatever it is, or any age, I suppose. You want a girl that's going to have a little bit of fun. Head out in that RV and get it in a little bit. Kind of release some of that stress. Having all day where you're taking care of these snotty kids at Camp Crystal Lake, that's going to bring some type of aggression in there. You got to let that stress out. And there's no better way to let that out by smashing it out with your girlfriend. You know what? I'm not a big drinker. I'm a social drinker at best, and I haven't had a drink in a very long time. I don't smoke. I don't do any drugs at all. So I don't have vices like that. So I kind of just default back to being a lovemaker. So Nikki is my Deadliest Diva for Friday the 13th Part 6. Not as high on the ratings as some of the other girls, but a more than respectable 7 out of 10 for Nikki in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Now, when it comes to the overall score and rating for this film, I think we have to take a look at Rotten Tomatoes. Now, remember, Friday the 13th Part 5 had a dismal and depressing rating, and Friday the 13th Part 6 is not like it's lighting up the world, but it's definitely a lot better. On the critics' side, Friday the 13th Part 6 with a 48% rating, and the fan score on the audience side, 52%. For me, that's a little bit better than the last time, but both are way off. Friday the 13th Part 6 is a ton of fun. That's what this movie is. It's fun, fun, fun. You got some pretty cool characters. You have a great lead, and this time we're getting a final guy, not a final girl, as we continue the Tommy Jarvis storyline through, and I really respect that. Tom Matthews is my favorite of all of the Tommy Jarvis portrayals, and he does a great job in this film, and it really kind of helps move the movie along. 48% for the critics, 52% for the audience. I'm going to push those completely aside, and I'm going to say that Friday the 13th Part 6 is a awesome and dope film that will go 4 out of 5 stars. Alright guys, but what about you? What do you think of Friday the 13th Part 6? Is it one of your favorites? Is it one that you don't really like? Do you not like the comedy and kind of the meta feel of it? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, you can hit like. If you loved it, you can subscribe. And remember, you can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter at RankingsRS. Thanks for joining me along this continued hike through Camp Crystal Lake. And remember, keep watching movies.